we're going to discuss the actual reasons why you should train with full range of motion. Now, you may have heard your friends, coach, your favorite influencer mention full range of motion, but I doubt they actually gave you a reason why. Let's find out. First, you need to know that one of the main mechanisms for muscle growth is something called mechanical tension. In short, mechanical tension is any force that tries to stretch our muscles. The more mechanical tension we put on our muscles per repetition, per set, and per workout, the more muscle growth we can stimulate, up to a certain point. There are two types of tension that make up mechanical tension. In simple terms, active tension is the tension created by actively contracting our muscles. The peak tension is produced when sarcomeres, aka muscle fibers, are at their resting length. Resting length is just the muscle's length when we're just standing. Sarcomeres are made up of both myosin and actin, and the peak tension is produced when sarcomeres are at its resting length because this provides the optimum alignment between the actin and myosin filaments. Passive tension is the tension that is created when our muscles are elongated or stretched. Our muscles behave similarly to a rubber band, and when stretched, it just wants to go back to its original length or resting length. Tension that is created from the muscles wanting to go back to its resting length is what creates passive tension. This means the overall mechanical tension is at its highest when we have overlapping passive and active tension, and this overlapping tension happens when we challenge our muscles in a stretched position. The common term for this is stretch-mediated hypertrophy, the stretching of muscles under load. Now that you've had the 30-second rundown on mechanical tension, let's go over some studies. We'll go over 4 studies that cover the different ranges of motion and muscle groups to get the complete picture on the effect of full range of motion. This first study from 2021 split their subjects into 2 groups and had both groups perform preacher curls with their dominant arm, except one group only performed the bottom half while the other group performed the top half of the movement. After 5 weeks, the group that performed only the first half of the preacher curl experienced greater muscular size and strength. The results from the study suggest that training your muscles while extended is more effective for both strength and size compared to when the muscle is trained at its flexed position. This gets more interesting. The second study from 2022 ran a very similar test to the one above, but this time it was for the lower body. The groups were divided into 3 groups: bottom half of the leg extension, the top half of the leg extension, and full range of motion. They measured the quads at 4 different lengths for 12 weeks. Guess what group saw the greatest change? The group that performed the bottom half of the movement had better results than the group performing the top half and even the full range of motion. This was definitely a surprise to me. These 2 studies go over the importance of the bottom portion of the exercise for muscle growth. And if we go back to the principle of mechanical tension, the results are not as shocking because the bottom portion of both preacher curl and leg extension elongates the muscle, which creates greater tension than the top half where the muscle is already in a contracted state. Does this mean that the more we're able to stretch the muscles, the better? Let's take a look at this study from 2022. In this study, they had 21 healthy young adults train their triceps using 2 different exercises. One arm was assigned to the overhead tricep extensions where the tricep is positioned at a greater stretch, and the other arm to the neutral arm tricep pushdown. The dominant and non-dominant arms were counterbalanced using a computer-generated list to make sure that everything was even. They performed these exercises twice a week, and to avoid favoring one arm over the other, during every workout, the subjects alternated which arm they trained first. If we use the information from the other 2 studies and apply the concept of the stretch-mediated hypertrophy, the overhead tricep extension should have the better result. So what actually happened? After 12 weeks, the overhead arm experienced about 1.5 times more growth, and not just the long head of the triceps, but all 3 heads of the triceps. More surprisingly, the overhead tricep extension saw better results even with lower absolute loads lifted. Okay, but this can't be true. Use less weights and still gain 1.5 times more muscle? Let's look at this last study from 2021. This study focused on the effects of the seated versus prone leg curl training on the hamstring muscle hypertrophy. The study had 20 healthy adults, and each leg was randomly assigned to either the seated or the prone leg, with the dominant and non-dominant legs counterbalanced by the use of a counter-generated list. They performed 5 sets of 10 reps with 50 to 70% of their 1 rep max for both legs, with 2-minute rest in between each set. They trained twice per week for 12 weeks straight. By the way, 3 out of the 4 hamstring muscles are lengthened more in the seated position compared to the prone position. So, according to the other 3 studies, what exercise do you think had the best result? If you guessed the seated hamstring curls, you're correct. The hamstring muscle hypertrophy was clearly greater after the seated leg than the prone leg curl training. So, what does this all mean for your training? These studies tell us that it is in fact beneficial to train with full range of motion because more mechanical tension can be created when our muscles are in a stretched position. therefore means more hypertrophy and strength. So the main takeaway from this is train with full range of motion. As we discussed, when muscle is stretched, the exercise becomes more effective. If you don't train with full range of motion, you will most likely miss out on these extra gains. Although most exercises when done with full range of motion will sufficiently stretch the muscles to stimulate stretch-mediated hypertrophy, some muscles can benefit from being stretched to a greater degree, like for the overhead tricep extensions where the muscle was positioned at a greater stretch and saw greater results. These muscles are called biarticular muscles. These muscles cross over two joints rather than just one, and as a result can be positioned in a way that stretches them even more than normal. So for these muscles, you'll want to make sure you're doing exercises that put them in that extra stretch position. So here are some exercises to challenge your muscle at that all-important stretched position. There's no evidence for most of these exercises, but they do allow the muscles to stretch to a greater degree. For the biceps, you can do the Bayesian curls or the incline dumbbell curls. For the quads, you can do sissy squats or try leaning back on your leg extensions. For the glutes, you can try doing Romanian deadlifts or the Bulgarian split squats. For the triceps, you can do the overhead tricep extensions and just do a different variation of them. For the chest, you can do some flies or some deficit push-ups. And for the shoulders, you can do some cross-body cable lateral raises. And for the calves, keep it simple and do some standing calf raises. Again, I just want to reiterate that when you do your workouts with full range of motion, that's when you'll see the best results. Doing quarter reps with 500 pounds won't build you more muscle than doing it with full range of motion, even when using less weight. And most of the extra stretch exercises are normal exercises that you're probably already doing, but it's just a good reminder to execute them with full range of motion. And one last way to potentially increase your gains is by doing partial reps. I know I just talked about full range of motion, but hear me out. That one study showed that performing the bottom half of the seated hamstring curl led to an even greater result than the full range of motion. Look, I'm not recommending that you start doing partial reps for everything from now on, but this is how I would incorporate them. If you're trying to do an all-out set, do as many reps as you can with full range of motion first. Then when you can't do any more reps, do as many partial reps while your muscles are in a stretched position. This can help increase the overall mechanical attention placed on the muscles in that set. I don't recommend doing this every set as it can affect your recovery time and therefore hinder your subsequent sets, but strategically placing these partial reps can help you gain extra muscle mass and strength. So just keep these studies in mind when you're training and always listen to your body. Just because full range of motion is better for hypertrophy and strength does not mean it's best for you. If you're not able to get into those positions because of your body structure, flexibility, or any other reasons, don't force it. Always be smart about your training. Alright, with that said, I hope you guys learned something new from these studies like I did, and if you're interested in becoming bigger, stronger, leaner, faster as a natural lifter, make sure to follow all my socials and subscribe because I'll be coming up with more evidence-based fitness content really soon.